They made a lot of beeps then. Did they make a lot of beeps for you?
It was quite beepy.
Normally there's just a beep a piece. Anyway, there we go. Right, here we go. Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode hails from the northwest of England and is a neurodivergent writer of the epic and the urban, the fantastical, the cosy, and the mysterious.
His works include the character-driven dark fantasy series Empire of Ruin and the urban noir fantasy...
We have lost David.
That's worse than the bots.
That's straight away. That's funny. Hello, David.
Did we offend you?
You're still muted, by the way.
Sorry about that. My Discord just decided to kick me out
That's absolutely fine.
Just because this is the perfect time to kick you out when you start doing the introduction. So.
It's better to do it now than when you're in the middle of your story or in the middle of a good point in the conversation. That's absolutely fine.
Better than 20
Sorry
minutes
about
that.
Seriously, not an issue at all. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to listen to us do that again because I feel like we're going to struggle to recover from that. One sec. Okay, here we go. Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode hails from the northwest of England and is a neurodivergent writer of the epic and the urban, the fantastical, the cosy, and the mysterious.
His works include the character-driven dark fantasy series Empire of Ruin and the urban noir fantasy Hell in Haven. We'd like to warmly welcome David Green.
Hello, David.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Don't thank us yet.
Yeah.
So
thank you rescinded for now.
I have to ask this one for personal reasons. Now, are you solely responsible for your son's obsession with Godzilla, or did you have any helpers into entering this young man in the kaiju fandom?
It was a strange one. He kind of came at it. I mean, I've liked kaiju and particularly Godzilla and King Kong for a very long time because I am in my 40s now, so yeah, a very long time. But I went with this kind of thing of like not trying to influence him with my influences to kind of see what he would like himself. But he just got into it, and it was very, very intense for a very, very long time, to the point that we went to watch Godzilla -1 in the cinema, like in Japanese, and he had a great time. So yeah, he loves it.
That's really cool. I was given an extremely heavy recommendation from Nico to watch -1, and I fucking loved it.
I don't know if that was after the first or second time that I watched it in the cinema, but
it was probably the second time, I think. But that's a hell of a movie. I accidentally started watching the dubbed version first. To which I received a digital slap from Nico. And,
it's great. It was a brilliant film, I mean, obviously the subtitled one is great, but I mean, my son was 6 at the time, so his reading was only kind of coming together a little bit, but he could read Godzilla and he could read kaiju. But the bit, there's a bit in the middle of the film where they start getting reports in from other countries, and you hear reports from America, and he turned to me in the cinema and was like, "Daddy, I can understand Japanese."
Oh wow!
I
was like trying not to laugh, because it's like.
Yes, my child. My bloodline is truly gifted.
But no, brilliant film. Yeah, we've watched a few of them. We've started going through the whole kind of 70 years worth of Godzilla films.
Yeah.
I'm possibly showing my lack of knowledge in this area here, but are there like mangas and stuff of Godzilla, or is it just movies in Toho?
Mangas, comics. I'd recommend Godzilla in Hell if you're looking for a comic. That's
nice.
Really
nice.
Yes.
Any tie-in novels yet, or is this a market burgeoning for prospective?
It could be. I'm a big fan of Supernatural, the TV show as well, and at FantasyCon, I bumped into the person who works for the company that owns the rights for the tie-ins for Supernatural, and I was like, I would love to write some Supernatural books. And he was like, well, we're not really doing them at the minute. I was like, I know, but as soon as you start doing them again, just tell me and I will write them. I was like, I have the fan fiction ready to go.
That is mad hustle. I love it. Great hustle. Great hustle. Well, speaking of stories and writing stories, we have all written some stories for today. We've written to the same shared prompt, which is going to be false. And Nico, you have the dubious honor of going first. Lie to me. Before Nico starts reading that, were you happy with the introduction? It's stolen brazenly from your website, so hopefully you're okay with it. But
it's great. It's one of those things. Whenever I hear someone reading it, I'm like, oh god.
No, so we've done this about 200 times. I can tell you right now, your website has the best blurb to steal from that I've ever seen, because that was written as verbal copy basically. So that worked really well. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, right. Well, the only other thing is we tend to mute our mics when we're listening to the stories, just because we like type our notes and all the rest of it. So.
Yep, of course, yeah.
When you're ready, Nico.
Yep. False. So sunk he was. 24 cannons headed for the locker, and with them enough powder to blow the skirts off the East India Company. Captain Oliver the Ruddy seized up his tankard and placed it to his lip. He made a show of draining the last drops, smacked his lips appreciatively, then placed the cup within grasping reach of his rapt audience. He allowed the silence to fester, filling the aged oak beams until they dripped with anticipation alongside their normal salt water. He waited until those present could take no more. But what became of the crew? The man who asked was broad as a barrel and near as full of rum as one. A mischievous glint took Oliver's one good eye. He leant forward conspiratorially. Well now, that's a fine question. My head broke brine, and I gasped at air as a newborn babe would. Truly, it tasted sweeter than the first coney of landfall. Appreciative nods from all the other salty denizens. I felt as though my very beard and cloak meant to drag me with my darling ship. What hope had I here adrift? No food nor water. My glorious ship, the Emerald Cockatiel, drowned. I cast my gaze about to find me crew, but not one did I see. No legs kicking against the tide, not a single gasping face. Where then, I thought, was the foe that brought us down so? To have me ship pull beneath the waves, she'd have to be a mighty galleon. The mug found itself near him again, filled. The power of a good tale. He quenched his thirst. Errant foam clung to his moustaches, and his tongue sought it out. Nothing. No sails decorated the skyline as far as the horizon in all directions. How could it be? I thought. Perhaps it's devils, then. Damned sailors, brought about to sink the vessels of hard-working privateers. But no. I had looked all ways, you see, except down. He filled his voice with as much gravitas as he could muster. His hope to summon up the depths in the mind's eye of every man present. Many of them did, then, see only the blackness that lurked beneath the turquoise of the open sea. And did you? Asked one sailor, unable to be patient. That I did, lad. That I did. I gazed down to see if any sign of rigging be left. If some flotsam from me vessel ought to be gathered to allow myself a portion of floating haven. But it was not my ship I saw. There, beneath the waves, was something. Like an eel it was. Its body swam without flipper nor fin. I couldn't tell at first how grand the beast might be, till I noticed, clutched in its hideous maw, my sweet ship, the emerald cockatiel. There were gasps. There were no's. One voice, cold and quiet in the room, said, "Lying bastard." Oliver looked up from his crowd to find the owner of the voice stood at the back of the room. He wore a look of disdain, which matched his ragged hat, torn jacket, and peg leg. Oliver pressed on in the hope the room had not heard what he had. "I called down at the monster. 'You blackguard,' I said, 'you heaving great serpent of the sea. My livelihood you've took, and me crew with it. Noble men, good, honest pirates." The room grumbled their agreement. "Drenched and drowned by you. Revenge I shall have on thee, O slithering stink, you wretched worm." At that I drew me sword, and thought to swim down on him, when up he came, at dreadful speed. At first I thought to move, for fear had wobbled me belly. I'm only human, after all, lads. The men agreed, save one. He had a space yet in his oily guts, one shaped for a captain, for the morsel he had missed. I held me nerve, and as the shadow came beneath me, I held me blade like so. He drew his sword then, and pointed it tip down, grasping at the hilt firmly with both hands. It wobbled slightly in his drunken grasp. But the effect was nearly there. As he rushed towards the surface, the shadow grew and grew. I felt as though the whole sea had come to swallow me. But I held me ground, me wave. One snort of derisive laughter nearly stopped Oliver, but he muscled on. I felt him first on the bottom of me boots, and I pushed down hard as ever a man has. I felt the blade tip meat flesh, and gave it all I had. I dared not open my eyes as I felt the wind rush past me. For what seemed an age I rose, and finally I had to look. My eye I opened, and I saw the sea below me. Far, far below. I were stood upon its nose, my blade sunk half a length. It bellowed fierce, and I felt me belly quake with the sound. I nearly plopped with pressure, so I did. The room had to a man leant forward then. Well, to all but one man. So what was it? An ancient monster from the depths, lad. Hungry for sailors. Green it was, and covered head to tail in scales as big as this table. I was lucky I had found a gap between them for my blade. Oliver took up his mug again and drained it. I had to act fast, I knew. I spied his bulging eyes on the side of his head, and made my plan at once. Having lost an eye and with it a fight, the only fight I ever have, mind you, I pulled free the blade, and I leapt off his mighty snout. As I passed by his head, I thought of home, of me lost lads, and of the pirate code. A cheer went up, and the mug left the table again, to Oliver's delight. I stuck it home true through the jellied bag of the foe, and burst it did, and covered me in rotten foam. How the thing screamed! I could only scream in return, as I released my sword and fell toward the waves. Oliver the Ruddy, I called, has done for you. By the time I surfaced once again, the beast was gone. The room burst to applause, and Oliver offered them a small bow. Then how come you to still have a sword? The questioning man had piped up. What? You let go of your sword in its eye. Well, I bought another one. Is that so? The questioning man lurched forward, his peg legs scraping and bumping as he came. How then did you return to land? I swam. Oliver gulped. Swam? By your tail, you were leagues out. I am a strong swimmer. The room had a hush fallen on it now. They'd all stopped for the exchange. Strong? You'd have to be a galleon with feet for a journey such as that. Well, then perhaps I am one. The peg-legged man had moved close now. Extremely close. And what did you call your ship? The Emerald Cockatiel. I thought so. The peg-legged man put his face so close that Oliver could feel nothing but the booze on his breath. His beard hairs withered in the fumes, and Oliver sensed a familiar itch as a coward's sweat began to gather on him. The same Emerald Cockatiel that was filled with honest sailors seeking work and handed to slavers, would that be? The same Emerald Cockatiel from which I heard a man with a voice quite like yours agree a price for my head. The same Emerald Cockatiel where I was clad in irons and left to have my bows fall loose upon myself, until the ship and all its contents were sold for a song to the first threat that arrived, to save its so-called captain, that same Emerald Cockatiel. Oliver swallowed again. Could be. It was, answered the peg-legged man. His black powder pistol had been drawn, but Oliver's view was obfuscated, and he had seen not a glint of it. Goodbye, Oliver. You sea snake, were the last words he heard before the lead ball finished his story.
Oh, that was atmospheric, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Atmospheric. Oh, crikey. David, what did you reckon?
Yeah, I loved it. I have to say, first-rate classic pirate accent. It was very, very good. But yeah, I love the story. No, I loved the story. I thought it was excellent. I was riveted.
For clarity, my story or his?
Yeah, the whole nested storytelling concept for a short story works really well, I think, because it allows you to cut into a scene and a story at the same time. I think.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. I like it whenever it gets used. It's a good device. Oliver the Ruddy. Now that immediately conjured Oliver Reed in Treasure Island for me. Was that a sort of deliberate choice, or?
So the Oliver for Oliver Reed was, but I didn't think about Treasure Island. I think my brain finished that joke for me.
Yeah, he's Billy Bones in Treasure Island.
Yeah.
So he's like this kind of like this drunk in a tavern, telling old stories and being a bit menacing. So that really worked for me a lot. and then you had this revenant with a peg leg, which would have been silver. It had.
I accidentally just.
In no way am I like you ripped off Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm saying I think you homaged Treasure Island really nicely in the brief amount of words that you had, with those kind of same sort of like similar sort of character archetypes interacting with each other. At least that was my read, and I really liked that because I like Treasure Island.
Well, as we're taught to do, that was entirely my intention. Yeah. I'm glad that you picked up on it.
It's good. It also gave me a really strong. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Black Sails. But
Not.
it gave me a really strong Black Sails vibe. Just that kind of intrigue and the lying to each other over storytelling thing. That's a real guilty pleasure of mine. Black Sails. That's
Oh, revel in the guilty, revel in the guilt. It's got the best intro song of any TV show of all
yeah.
time as well.
Hurdy-gurdy up the ass is how I describe that one. It's got some generally wicked music. There's a wonderful version of A Parson's Tale, or A Parson's Farewell, I think it's called. That like builds to like a rock crescendo.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really good. You've almost certainly heard it before, Nico, because I play it too often to be considered sane.
It's one of those songs that to me is just role play music.
Yes, very much so. Yeah,
Lovely.
for sure.
Lovely stuff.
I like the idea of dealing with a hostile audience in a story as well. It became a story about storytelling, didn't it?
I think so. Do you know what? As I was writing it, I realised that I was drawing a lot of inspiration from Beowulf.
Yes, I was just about to mention Beowulf.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent. Same page. Liked it. The familiar itch of a coward's sweat was a great line. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I think that does a lot to do the character reveal. I thought I was looking for the way to show that actually, yeah, he is a complete blackguard.
Yeah, I think that worked. I think that worked. There were a couple of bits that I thought maybe potentially weren't necessary. There was the held my ground. I mean, sea or wave that he said.
Yeah,
I felt like he is still a sailor, isn't he? So I'm not like had he turned out to be lying about being a sailor, that might have worked. But I thought,
okay,
maybe, yeah. I could be wrong. That's just my take on that one. And then in their exchange at the end, sorry, the peg leg character that shoots him says it was when we already, as the audience, we already know. Everybody in the scene already knows, and we already know that this guy has completely skewered him. Like he knows that this is the guy that sold him out. So I think the is a bit redundant, and it could just the next bit of that conversation could be just him pulling the pistol, which is answer enough, I think. But I really liked it. I like a bit of swashbuckle, and that had it in spades, and was a bit of a meditation on piratical storytelling as well. I think it was good.
Yeah,
I'm thoroughly glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, that's good note there. I think you're. Hello, story seekers. As some of you may remember, but a week ago for you, but mere moments ago for Ben and I was being very odd towards David Green, and I intend to continue doing so. David, are you prepared to be asked questions?
I am always prepared for questions. I have a 7-year-old.
Great answer.
Well, in that case, David, what is the first story you wrote that meant something to you?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I've never ever actually thought about this. The first one that meant something to me, oh God, this could get very, very heavy, but I will be honest because honesty is the best policy. So, when I first started writing, I was doing some creative writing lessons, as an adult. It was something that I always wanted to do since I was a young wee child. Trying to hunt down Alan Garner in Alderley Edge. And I waited for a very long time to start doing it. And I started with creative writing lessons. And you were getting kind of prompts every week. And these prompts would be like, write a story about the worst job you've ever had. And, I did that. Which was a manager of Build a Bear Workshop, just in case you're curious. And it was particularly, in fact, I had to dress up as a mascot pretty much every weekend in a massive big bunny suit, and manage the shop whilst dressed like that. And there's other things like I can't even remember some of the prompts, but one of them was which is funny because of the prompts that we did for the stories, which was we picked false, but the prompt was write a story where you were being truthful to yourself. So I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, what could I write about this? And it was kind of like, you couldn't write any more, similar to this, you couldn't write any more than kind of 1,200 words, 1,500 words or whatever. And up until that point, I'd been kind of writing very kind of, other than the worst job. I was kind of doing more like speculative fiction, and I did a couple of like kind of Western kind of inspired ones. So I do like Westerns, but nothing was ever kind of like truthful, I suppose. Um, so I was kind of thinking, well, what is the most truthful thing in my life? And so I was thinking about what was the thing that had the biggest effect on me. Um, so I'd just become a dad a couple of years before, and that obviously had a big effect on me. Um, but the thing of it, I was kind of thinking generations and stuff like that. And when I was 11, I was the last person to see my granddad alive, and then I found him when he died. And he had the same birthday as me. Not the same year because that would have been very strange, but the same day. We spent a lot of time with each other. My dad wasn't around that much, so he was kind of like uh, he was my role model, my father figure, and whatever. And we looked very, very similar to each other. You see pictures of him when he was younger, and it was basically the same age. We're very, very similar, and my son is the same. So I just started writing about that because it was something that when it all happened and everything, I was kind of diagnosed with general anxiety disorder soon afterwards. So I was in and out of therapy for a long, long time about it, but it was something that I never really talked about, even still, and it was something that I'd kind of never really kind of looked at in terms of truth, in terms of um, how that affected me, in terms of how I saw the world, and kind of um, how it ended my childhood in a way, as
Yeah.
if because it was at that age. I mean, I was in England at the time, so I was just getting ready to start secondary school as well. It was the end of the first year of primary school. Um, so it was that time where you are just kind of going into that bigger world, I suppose, where you're going to be meeting lots of new people, saying goodbye to people that you knew anyway. When you go from primary school to secondary school.
Yeah.
And then obviously with that kind of happening and everything, I'd never really kind of examined it in terms of like that the boy that I was gone from that point onwards. It wasn't like a gradual kind of goodbye as like a lot of people do when they grow into teenage years and whatever into adulthood. It was a very much like it was a that's it, right? So that was the thing, and I kind of wrote it, and I kind of tried to link it into kind of my relationship with my granddad, with my own dad as well, and then my son, and then the kind of the boy that I was. And it went a little bit longer than the 1,500 words, to be
But it
fair.
sounds like it was worthwhile. I mean, did you feel that was the sort of the real start of your journey as a writer there, to be so true to yourself and be
Yeah,
so open in a storytelling context?
yeah, I think so. And I remember we had to read it out to the other people that were in the group as well as the tutor.
Yeah.
And it was tough to read. Like it was a tough one to read, and I actually felt just a lot of grief when I was reading it.
Yeah.
For a lot of different things. Um, and I remember finishing, and there was silence in the room, and usually there'd be like clapping and what have you, and it was complete silence. And we had to make copies of them as well, so I had to hand it out to everyone. So everyone and people were crying in the room.
Wow.
And I remember the guy Kevin, who was the instructor. He was quite like choked up, and he said to me, he said like, I've enjoyed all of your work so far, but this is going to have the biggest bearing on all of your writing that you do. And he said, do you feel that as well? And I knew what he meant, because it was that kind of thing where I think as a writer, you can write stories that don't have much kind of subtext, and they don't kind of they don't have a it's just a story. You can do that, and that's completely fine, and we all do it. It's sometimes it's nice to do that, but when you're like kind of creating something that's long form, I think, or something that's you've really kind of put in a bit of yourself into, there needs to be some kind of vulnerability to it, and there needs to be some
Agree.
kind of truism to it as well. Um, you have to be true to yourself, and I think that was the first time that I was in all those ways. And so it's not like, I write quite light stuff. I can write stuff that's quite funny. I can write stuff that's cozy, but I always try to bring some kind of emotional truth to it, which sounds like sounds quite foppish, like like Tarquin, I suppose, from last week's episode for the story.
Yeah.
But I think it's like I think you need to kind of have that emotional truth to a story, because it helps you connect with characters, especially when you're writing fantasy, sci-fi, all this speculative stuff. There needs to be that emotional truth there for people to kind of go, okay, there's dragons in this world, there's magic, there's this, but I can understand what this character is going through.
I couldn't agree more. I think this idea of having some emotional truth in what you're writing isn't necessarily foppish. I think it's actually necessary to writing good stories. Because I've read lots about how different people approach writing, and none of them are like lock your emotions away, never reveal who you truly are. Like that's always a part of it, isn't it? It's to open yourself up. And I think if you're not a little bit scared about telling your story because of what it reveals about you, then you potentially haven't been open enough. Would be my take. That really resonated with me as your that moment of you sort of becoming a writer there, because I did something quite similar where I wrote my granddad, before he died, told me a story about his granddad, and when he died, I wrote a poem from the perspective of my granddad talking about his granddad, and then I read it at his funeral, and it's the only time I've ever choked up whilst reading, and fuck me, realizing that there's a church or whatever full of people waiting, and there's just this lump in your throat that you cannot talk past. But then knowing that I had to, and just sort of getting myself together and then finishing it off, was a really pivotal moment for me as well. So I can definitely relate to that. It's nice work. The fact that you made everybody cry as well. Fuck, I mean, it must have been good. all the other stuff aside, it must have been good.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
I've not really gone back to look at it very often, so I don't know.
Well, I think it did its job. I think that's a fantastic answer to that question. So,
thank you.
On your writing, and obviously it's evolved from there, and we've sort of seen the genesis point there. Where would you recommend that the folks listening start reading your body of work, and also where should they buy it?
I mean, I think In Solitude Shadow is probably the place to start. I think that with the caveat of, if you like epic fantasy, right? If you don't like epic fantasy, then maybe the Helen Haven series, because it's urban fantasy and it's a bit more. I mean, there's still heavy themes in it, and there's still a lot of lightness and everything. But yeah, In Solitude Shadows, particularly the new version of it, which you can get on Amazon. And you can get it on my website as well through there, which is davidgreenwriter.com. In Solitude Shadow, so it was the first book that I wrote, and then I had the opportunity to go back and rewrite and expand it, and re-release the entire series recently with new covers and everything. But it has kind of, and it's the same story that it was before. Like, it's not the story hasn't changed; it's just told in a more experienced with a more experienced hand and eye than when I first wrote it. But it has a lot of those kind of things that, if you want to kind of see what I can kind of, the themes that I like, that I'm drawn to, the tropes that I'm drawn to, the kind of subject matter that I like to write about, it kind of has it all there. Because I mean, that's the beauty of epic fantasy, isn't it? I mean, you can put so much different themes and tropes and influences in there as well, because I mean, I'm a huge fantasy fan. I have been my entire life. So In Solitude Shadow was kind of like my thing, where it was like, well, I'd like to, my homages to certain fantasy stuff, but also with my kind of thing. Well, I don't really see a lot of this. Like, so for example, like the main story and the main driver of the story in the first book is a relationship between mother and daughter, and it's not like they're not young mother and daughter either. Like, the daughter Colleen is in her mid-30s, and the mother is in her late 50s. So it's
it's a lived-in relationship for sure, not like a
exactly. So that would be the one. And then obviously, if you like that, then there's three other books in that series, and I genuinely do think they get better as well. The jump between the first and second one isn't as high as it used to be after I've gone back and expanded it and rewrote it. But like like I said last time, that the second, third, and fourth book were all nominated for best novel at the British Fantasy Awards, and I think and other things as well. The last two have been nominated for other things, whereas like now there's not. It's a bit of a smoother ramp up to kind of like the kind of where the series goes. So yeah, that'd be that. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another example of where somebody's got to go back and rewrite art in like post publication, and the only thing that's coming to my mind is American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
I think he got his hands back on that and then got to go and do a bit of a smoothing over of it, I think. Or at least
quite different then. I was going to say, do you worry, David, that you'll get sort of George Lucasified on this?
Oh, I see.
And keep going back and saying, well, when I originally wrote this, I had imagined there would be far more CGI creatures in this book. So I am going to put some in now.
Yeah, there was
the main character screaming and.
I did put in some CGI characters. Yeah, I did. There was a few that I dropped in there, and I made some characters shoot second instead of first.
30 years time, you're going to make billions from the Disney Corporation. just buckle in and ride it out, my friend. McClunky to you all, I say.
McClunky. Yeah, that's the good one.
So, say hypothetically, David, that there were two writers and they were being held hostage by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer, for the uneducated, a wizard of the word. Now, this bibliomancer, he draws his energy from people's love of books. And so he has, let's not say enslaved, it's an ugly word, employed these two writers, and he sends them out to find more well-loved books for his library. What novel is closest to your heart, just to buy us a bit of time, hypothetically?
Okay. Well, it's a very, very easy answer. Like you can't see, obviously this is just audio only, so no one can see what I'm currently wearing, but I am wearing a t-shirt that is the map of Middle-earth. So it's a very, very easy answer. It's I have a Gandalf tattoo as well and some other things. It would be Lord of the Rings, which is a very kind of boring answer, but it's the one that I always go back to, and the beauty of it is that it is aging now. It is like it's it's 70 years old pretty soon, since Fellowship of the Ring came out, and there's some stuff in it obviously where nowadays where you go, don't do this and don't write like that, and there's a lot of this and there's a lot of that, but it's one of those things that when you every time, and I'm one of these people that go back and read it every year, as well as the Silmarillion and the Hobbit and some other things. I discover something new about it, and it's not even that some parts of it I react differently to, with getting older and my perspective changing, which that is the case. But also, there's just other things where I'm like, oh, I never noticed that before, and I never sort of seen what he did this, and I get this what he's doing now.
Yeah.
And it just works on so many different levels, and it's just the imagination is staggering, and just to think that the Lord of the Rings was kind of an afterthought of an afterthought for what he was kind of doing.
Is that like part of the charm at this point, at least from your perspective as a writer, as an author of your own fantasy books? But we know so much about how the ideas for it evolved, like the different shapes that it was in, just from all of the stuff that he wrote around it, and also from his son sort of desk diving to create a career afterwards. It's just such an interesting process to have seen and to have been analysed so much that we're so aware of all of the moving parts of how that came about. It's not just like it popped up. It's like we know how it happened and how it evolved.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is really like I think so. There's this thing. I mean, I could talk about Tolkien for days, not even hours, for literal days without stopping. And I think this whole kind of the mythology for England thing was a bit over-egged. I think it was something that was dropped quite early on, but it did become its own mythology. And like any kind of mythology, there's contradictions within the texts. There's contradictions within when you go back and look at the if you read Lord of the Rings and go and look at the Hobbit and the Silmarillion, there is contradictions because of the way they were crafted. You know, the Silmarillion is just Christopher Tolkien's edited version of the work that was mostly finished, and there's bits in that where he's publicly said, "Oh yeah, I made a mistake here because this wasn't my father's intention." And but what that has done is that it's taken this mythological thing, whereas like we look at our real world myths and none of them kind of fit quite well together when you lay them all out. There's different. You look at like Norse mythology, and you've got like different portrayals of the gods depending on what story is being told. You've got different versions of events. You've got different things that kind of happened, and you look at that within Middle Earth, and it's the same. And I think that's how it should be because
Yeah.
it is essentially, you know, it is also set in our world, but it is also the history of people, but are written by unreliable narrators.
Yeah.
So it does have this thing, yeah, because like you know, it has this kind of thing where it's yeah, I mean, Silmarillion is written by the elves. It's history of the elves for the elves, but it's like which type of elves, right? And
Yeah.
like you know, and was Feanor the person that was writing the Silmarillion? Did they not like Feanor? Were they you know
Feanor
you
is
know
definitely done dirty. I think that's. I'm a Feanor apologist.
yeah
I'm a fan or apologist.
yeah
Oh, that got
yeah
me good.
No, the that idea of like how the idea is constructed, I think, really leads us really neatly on to the next question, which is, what is your editing process? So you've written your first draft, you have it out there, and you're looking at how to improve it, how to turn it into a polished final thing. What is the process that you in how you go about it?
Yeah, so I'm one of these people that I don't kind of do like an actual first draft. It's never when I finish a book, it's like it's not like I'm like that's the first draft. I have like a really kind of strange writing process, I guess. So, um, I have to write in order. I can't write like you know a bit of this, a bit of that, and you know all that kind of stuff. I have to write chronologically. But what I do is I will write. I'll spend the day writing, doing whatever it is, and then the next time I come and sit down, I will go back over the thing that I wrote the day before or the last writing session, and polish that up and do that, so I know that I'm on track with the story, and with the thing. So I'll keep doing that. So like basically like you know when I get to say the first three chapters or something, I've probably gone over that 3 or 4 times in each chapter. Um, and then what I will also kind of do is I have my beta readers come in quite early. So once I've kind of got like about 6 chapters or something done, I'll get them to come in and have a look at it and just see if it's working at that early stage.
With
Um,
your beta readers in that early, does that let you start affecting changes quite quickly? Like if people are reading the first few chapters and they don't like a character, can you write a sudden canyon in that they fall down, or do you still write it out with your original plan?
yes, no, we're not at the Southern Canyons yet, but there is scope for a course correction. You know,
Yeah.
you're not getting all the way down to the end of the book and then saying this isn't working or people aren't responding to this character or this is a huge problem. That's going to take a long time to unpick. Um, and so and it's good to kind of just get a feeling of like, is this effective? You know, is it because I mean the beginning of the story has to work. You know, it has to pull
Yeah.
people in, even in a rough kind of stage or you know, it has to pull people in. So you want to kind of get that feeling because if it isn't, then you want to kind of. And I mean, I teach creative writing lessons, and the thing that I always say to people at the end of the lessons, what we try and do is I try to get them with a really, really strong opening to a book with lots of different kind of work. We do a lot of different kind of work and everything. But the thing that I always want to ask them is, are you happy with this, and are you excited to work on it?
Mm,
Um,
good
and
question.
you know, I because if the answer is no, then you've got a problem. Because if you're not excited to work on it, then people aren't going to be excited to read it once they get it. And also, it takes a long time to write a book, so you don't want to be kind of going down to it. So that's the way I kind of work. So I'll do that, and then what I'll also do as well, I have that kind of organic thing as well. Whereas, like, if something occurs to me, I will kind of I bracket. I use brackets quite a lot of stuff. So if something occurs to me where I'm like, this is a good idea, I'll just I'll just put whatever it is, and I'll put in brackets like go back to and insert and seed this idea a little bit earlier. So there is still that kind of thing where that kind of happens, but there's always I kind of need forward motion. So with the way that I work with that, it's like basically when I kind of write the end, it's basically the back half of the last few chapters of the book are only the ones that really need a lot of work, and then it's like
Yeah.
when the beta readers kind of catch up, um, then it's all kind of fresh. It's all kind of ready in the mind to go in there and do anything that needs to be fixed or tweak things. So yeah, that's still kind of so it is when I describe it and I have before it does sound like the method of madness, but it's
It
my
sounds like
method
that.
of madness.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think a book can become quite unwieldy. I know I I finished and started sort of going on sub and stuff with a book late last year, and the thought of having to edit all of it when I'd done it, I'd already done a couple of passes, and it's 110,000 words or something like that. I just I actually did get a little bit overawed by my own thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually quite like your approach. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like it's smart, especially if you've got such dedicated beta readers as well. How did
Hmm.
you earn the loyalty of such folk?
Oh, it was bribes,
Yep.
witchcraft. No, it was it was one of those things like I kind of when I first started writing, I was doing a lot of short stories and what have you, and I just kind of got to know other kind of writers basically that were looking to go more down the indie and self-published paths at the time. So a lot of that is kind of like if you do this for me, I will do this for you, right? So I beta read so my beta readers, I beta read for them as well. But it is that case of finding ones that you trust, and also you find not that the feedback is what you want to hear, but it's the kind of feedback that you need.
That you can make
Um,
use of, yeah.
yeah, and to that end, that there is one of my beta readers who is just a reader. They don't write, and for them, the thing is I send them whenever the book is published, I send them a copy of the book, a signed copy of the book as a thank you, and obviously they get to read things in states that few people get to read, right? And get in there. And but I think that I do think that perspective is really really helpful to have. Of like it's great to go to other writers and kind of ask things, um, and kind of get that kind of about structure and about character and about things that you're doing. But it's also great just to get the perspective of someone who's like, I want to read a story,
So,
and is it
so those are the people who are helping you write your stories now. But is
hmm.
there a person who inspired you to start telling your own stories in the first place?
Oh, someone who inspired me. I guess when my son was born was the catalyst to actually start doing it. Um,
Yeah.
because I'd always wanted to do it, but I always put it off. I was like, well, I'm too busy, or I'll do it when this happens, or I'll do it after this, or I'll do this and that's this and this. I got to the point where I was like 36, 35, 36, and I've been working in kind of like retail management my whole life, and I was like, this I've been doing not what I've wanted to do for like a big part of my life, and I'd like to have something. So that's why I started dabbling with the creative writing. And then when COVID happened, it was like, well, if I'm not gonna do it, I was at home looking after my son at that point, and I was like, if I'm not gonna actually try and do this at this point, then I'm never gonna do it.
Mm.
So that was it. But in terms of like early kind of like I want to be a writer, it wasn't Lord of the Rings actually, and it wasn't anything. It was Alan Garner, because So I lived in Warrington, which is in Cheshire, which is not too far from Manchester, and it is not too far from Alderley Edge. We used to go to Alderley Edge quite a lot to play as kids, and it's an amazing place, lovely village. But the Edge itself is fascinating. There's loads like local legends and myths of like Fae and Arthurian stuff there and everything. And Alan Garner lived there, and all of his books that he wrote were all based in Alderley Edge, and it was amazing to go there after reading one of the books and just looking at it and going, I wonder, like, at night time, is this different? And I wonder, like, under the full moon, will this happen? And so it was amazing to kind of think what someone that lived quite close to where I lived could just go and go and write a book. So it was always like, yeah, it was great. It was amazing. Yeah.
I think so. Obviously, that's sort of potentially the most famous book of his was The Weird Stone of Brisingamen, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
That one is my favorite. Yeah, that one is my favorite. Yeah, I've not read his new one yet because I'm scared of reading it because he's an old guy now. He's in his 90s, and and he's of a certain kind of era that is like, is this still going to be? Does this still work? So I will read it one day. But no, I loved him, and I met him when I was about 10 years old, and I had my copies of the book because in one of the backs of the books he said he could be found. I can't remember the name of the pub, but he's like he can be found at the weekends drinking in like this pub in Alderley Edge. So we were down there, and I brought my books. And I went in, and he was there, and I was like, "Hello, Mr. Garner, could you sign my books for me, please?" And he was like, "Oh yes, of course, of course, bring it over here." And he was like,
"Does that depend on what time of day you catch him to see how deep he is in his cups?"
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, apparently, I've heard since that he can be quite. He can be quite difficult. I think. Yeah.
No, it's just the idea of being like famously available in a pub, like to be propping up the bar to the degree that you're famous for being at that bar is
yeah.
We all need something to aspire to, don't we, Ben? I think.
I mean that immediately sounded like goals to me. So. Oh, that's really something, isn't it? I had a not to continually equate your life to my life, but it is getting a bit weird because I also had like an early fascination with Anthony Horowitz, and I ended up meeting him roughly about the same age, like about 10, and yeah, there's something really lovely about meeting someone whose work you're already really enjoying, and then getting to see that they're just a person. They're a person like you.
Right, yeah.
It feels doable. It feels doable when you meet people like that.
Yeah, it does, and it's great. I mean, when you go to kind of stuff like Fantasy Con and all of this kind of stuff, especially when I first started going, you go and talk to the likes of Anna Smith-Spark and Adrian Tchaikovsky and all these people, and you just say to them, oh, they have the same problems with writing that you do. It's like they're like, oh, the beginning was good and easy. The end, I know what the end is. I have no idea what I'm doing in the middle. And they're like, yeah, been there, exact same situation now in the book that I'm working in. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's nice. It kind of sets you at ease a little bit, where it's like, these people that are giants in your kind of mind and then their skill and the things that you enjoy so much. Like I met Joe Abercrombie not so long ago, and he was so down to earth, and I was able to tell him I wasn't going to tell him, but my friend told him that he was like, you're his favorite like living author, and he was like, is that true? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, do you want to say it a little bit louder so everyone can hear? And I was like,
yeah.
And I was like, yeah, of course. Yeah. And then we're chatting, and he was just saying just the same things, very very similar issues that all writers have, and it's amazing to kind of just hear that, because writing a book is such a lonely thing sometimes, and you can get very very stuck in the weeds with it, and you're like, well, how am I going to get from this point to here, and I've got another 100,000 words to go, and all this, and it's just it's quite comforting when you hear that other people are just the same.
Right. So this one's a touch heavy. So feel free to answer it how you wish. But what role does religion have in fantasy storytelling for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I So I was brought up as a Catholic, being Irish and living in the northwest of England. I don't think I had any choice in the matter anyway. But I'm not a particularly religious person. I do think that faith is something to admire, and I kind of envy people that have faith as long as it's not harmful to other people. Um, but in terms of writing, I think it is a very, very rich background to explore, and a very, very important topic. And it's something that when I'm kind of creating a character, it's one of the questions that I always ask myself is, are they religious?
Mm.
And from that, I'm able to kind of, because the way I kind of build worlds is I start with a character first, and whatever that protagonist is, the other kind of protagonists are built from that first one, and then the world is as well. So if I ask them, are they religious, and the answer is yes, I'm like, well, what is the religion? What do they believe? And it's one of those things. It's something that is relatable that everyone can kind of understand in one way, even if you're religious or not. It's something that people can understand. Um, but in terms of what I always find quite fascinating in fantasy is that people just accept that gods exist just at face value. They're just like, yeah, they exist, right? It's very, very rare that you read something where it's like there is no gods, or people don't believe in them, or there is examples, but it's not particularly often. And what's also quite funny is you get quite known religious writers, like Brandon Sanderson, for example, that always create worlds that have many gods, right?
Mm.
And it's always I always find that quite fascinating, and it's like okay, well, but I think it's interesting, and it's something. What I do like about it is that when gods are personified and they're interacting with the world, and
I was going to ask you, are you a God's in or a God's out person? Do you like it when they show up, or are you a? I think you're about to give me a. That's my answer.
yeah. So in my own writing, I have dabbled with that. I've kind of in my Empire of Ruin, not to go into massive spoilers for it or anything like that, but I've kind of explored both angles of it, of God's being as a faith kind of thing, where it's like you have to just have faith in it. But then I've also looked at it as in like let's look at, and I've also looked at false gods as well, which I think is an
Ooh.
important thing to look at of false gods, especially when magic is involved. Like I think it's you know uh, what's if someone has the power of creation or annihilation, are they a god? Do they think themselves as a god? So I think that's interesting to look at. But then I do like it when, and I think of my holler and stuff, like, obviously because the way that's the subject matter of that, which is directly to do with kind of like a religious background and stuff, is interesting because obviously they're all characters, and I do treat it as a story. And I have been told that I've been blasphemous from some people with that series in particular, but I respond.
Badge of honor.
Yeah, but I said to him, thanks very much for your feedback, but if anything, I am confirming your belief that God exists, right?
He's just a bastard.
This book.
Not
Yeah,
too bad. He's a chill guy.
I think this question is particularly interesting because of your story in the first part of this pair of episodes, because as I mentioned, you'd kind of replaced what would have been the second born goes to church, becomes a priest or something, with an
Mhm.
adventurous thing. So I thought it was really interesting that because it is quite rare to not have any sort of religion, but you'd actually taken that into account and found a different place for that where that kind of person in that kind of society would be forced to go rather than going to the church.
Yes.
Um, So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think I can see why it's, I think if you create a world and it doesn't have some kind of religious aspect in it, it would be lacking for a certain, because I think it's just like it's what we do. We search for answers, and part of that is to create a belief system. And then, there's that argument of like, as a society, as a people become more technologically advanced and more kind of learned of the world, we grow past that. But I think it's an interesting thing with fantasy in particular of the relationship between magic and religion. I always find that quite fascinating.
Mm. I think there's a lot of. It's a very Japanese centric thing, but they love a story about people eventually having to go and fight/kill God, which is it sort of runs at an inverse to the Western idea where people generally do things in service of God. So it's yeah, I think do you vibe with that Japanese side of it? The Final Fantasy kind of taking up arms against a deity, or do you not like him having so much center stage? Is that too much?
No, I mean I can understand that. I mean it ties into the kind of creations killing their masters, their creators, sons overcoming the father kind of thing, doesn't it? It's a natural
Yeah.
extension of that. And I do, yeah, I do. I mean, I love McKellen's Powder Mage trilogy, where like all the gods are just meddlesome idiots that are just have this petty feud that's going on for ages, and they're all just there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Like I think Erickson dabbles with that kind of more kind of overcoming gods in terms of like if you think of like Western authors. And with that though, he does that thing where it's like people are becoming God as well. They're becoming the head of their high house, and they're getting these kind of powers, and they are like supplanting these older gods. And yeah, it is very interesting, and it makes sense to me as well. Like in terms of I sometimes like think of what if your characters that you created came to life and met you, what would they think about you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know you were raised Catholic, but as you are now, do you feel connected to any particular culture or subculture? And if you do, how has it affected your writing?
Um, geez, that's a good question as well. Oh
Sorry
man,
about that.
you're really making me think. uh, Usually when I do a lot of interviews, I usually do it's kind of like, who's your favorite writer, and like what's your favorite color and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh yeah, kind of grown out of favorite colors now. What's your favorite dinosaur? Still a Brachiosaurus. It's never going to change. But
Right,
anyway,
that's the real questions. Bacon or sausages?
bacon. Depends on the type of bacon and the type of sausages.
Right, no,
That's
that's
a
it. Go
trick.
back to the previous one. What culture do you feel connected to?
Because the correct answer is
uh,
both, right? That's okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh no, I would say the American style bacon is way off the no, if that was I can't be having that. Needs to be real bacon. Anyway, yeah. So no, so I guess I think it's a really difficult one to answer. I think it really kind of ties into my autism as well, because I was late diagnosed with autism, um, despite when I look back at it thinking, oh my God, it was so clear that I was autistic, and why did nobody notice? But I think
Yeah.
people did notice, and it wasn't that but I was quite good at masking and to a
Yeah.
certain extent. But I've always kind of so yeah. I mean, I have an Irish mother and an English father, and I never quite felt Irish enough to be Irish, and I never really quite felt English enough to be English.
Mm.
You know, And so I never really knew where to kind of fit in culturally, I suppose, with that. I would think of myself I would think of myself as Irish, but I certainly don't sound Irish. Um, and where I live in Ireland, it's very rural, and my accent really sticks out. Okay, um, and but I never thought of myself culturally as English either. To be fair, and then when I was kind of growing up, yeah, that the kind of thing with like not quite fitting in and not really kind of quite finding my tribe, um, was something that kind of was always a thing. Like my best friend is the same best friend that I had in high school, right?
Oh, that's nice.
I've known him for 30 years, right? Um, it's not that I don't make friends easily, but I have the same best friend, right? And it's probably never going to change. And so I think up until I got into kind of the writing world, that is when I first really kind of started to feel like, you know what, I feel like I do belong here. And I think a part of that is that there's a huge amount of neurodivergent people in the writing world. Like,
Yeah.
who would have thought it? Right?
Yeah.
That, and and it's lovely to kind of to see that and to kind of go to conventions which are quite nerve-wracking, and you have to people and there's a lot of noise, a lot of things going on, a lot of all this kind of stuff. But I always feel very, very comfortable and kind of that I've found where I'm supposed to be when I go to them and talk to other writers and talk to readers and um,
I think
so
just on
yeah,
that before we move off that, I think we should just mention that you are the secretary for the British Fantasy Society, which we went to last year, and I would say that I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but I was very nervous going to our first convention as a podcast, writing duo, and
Yeah.
I think Nico sort of had to talk me into it a little bit, I would say. Um,
I
but
did practice by talking myself into it, so I cheated a bit.
yeah, yeah, but it was really nice. You're completely spot on. That idea of you turn up, you worry about it, and then it's just full of people who have similar sort of outlook to you, and that are all there for the same reason, which is to have a good time, talk about storytelling. It's fucking lovely.
yeah. Well, thank you. I'm really glad that you both enjoyed it. But I was doing the exact same thing. My first one was FantasyCon 2021. Um, and I had everything booked, and I was trying to talk myself out of it up until
Mm.
the day that I left, to go to fly over to England, and yeah, and I've loved it every single aspect of it since, and yeah, I just find I love creative people. I feel inspired by creative people. I love seeing them talk about the things that they love, what they're passionate about. It makes me want to go and create my own things, but it also makes me desperately want to read or look at what they have created, or listen to. And I think there's a real kind of innocence about it as well when people are talking about these things that they love. The walls drop a little bit, and I think when you're in a place where you kind of feel safe about talking about, like, your influences or the process that you've done or the things that you've put into it, and your experiences, it's just lovely, I think. And I don't think there's a lot of places like that you can get in the world these days. But people like you guys and hopefully what we do at the British Fantasy Society, like, we kind of try to nurture that, and I think that's only a great and positive thing.
Absolutely. I do have a follow-up question, which is about your best friend of 30 years. Um, do you? There must be a temptation to start if you know someone that well and for that long. There must be a temptation to start inserting either parts of their personality or themselves wholesale into your writing. Have they ever come to you having read a bit of your work and they're sort of like, "Dude, could you not talk about what happened when I was 22?" Is
You
that
know what? You know what? He's never noticed, and I
he's never
have
noticed?
absolutely, I have absolutely done that as well. Many people that are listening to this, if they are involved in and around the British Fantasy Society, will know who it is that I'm talking about as well, because he is. I wrote him along to my to FantasyCon 2021 for moral support. Yeah, he. But I have done that. I've inserted situations. I've inserted parts of his personality, and he has never noticed.
It's just occurred to me that I've never done that to Nico, but I'm starting to think you might have done it to me.
What do you mean?
Oh, fantastic. So we're aware that your next project that you've sort of got in the works is the one to do with the Adventurers Guild and the Mind Mage Psychiatrist to D&D Adventure Group. But where should people go to keep up to date with your news and buy your books and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the best. I mean, my website is davidgreenwriter.com. Blue Sky is where I kind of hang out in terms of social media these days, where I am David Green Writer. Also on Instagram, if you want to see pictures of characters from Baldur's Gate 3, because they go on there quite a lot. Yes, they are there. That's David Green Writer as well. And I have my Facebook readers group, which is called David Green's Readerverse of Madness, which I will probably rename at some point in the future. But that's what it currently is. And I probably won't rename it because it's in all of my books at the back where it's like, join the reader group, so I probably can't rename it. But they're the places. I'm locked in, yeah, I'm definitely locked in. Also, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the secretary for the British Fantasy Society, so you can send me lots of emails there because my email is all over the website. But yeah, that's where most of my news gets announced, and hopefully, fingers crossed and touch wood, there'll be some big news soon in the not too distant future for book related stuff.
Fantastic.
Oh, bloody well hope so. David, you have been marvellous company, I have to say. You speak so passionately and so eloquently, and it's just been a pleasure having you on.
Oh, thanks so much. I've actually really been looking forward to this because I'm a fan of the podcast. I saw you guys when you were nominated for Best Audio at the British Fantasy Awards last year, so I started listening. Really enjoyed them. I know people that have been on that have had nothing but great things to say. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure being here.
Wonderful. That's lovely to hear. And I just want to second what Nico said. I loved your story, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. So we'll have to see you in Brighton for FantasyCon this year, and maybe we'll get a beer or something. But for now, I think we'll release you back into the wild. And yeah, just thanks again for your time and for your impassioned eloquence. It's been delightful.
Now go on, now get.
We can't possibly end on you saying that. That's ridiculous.
Well, now it's going to end on that when you say we can't possibly end on you saying that.
See what I have to deal with, David? I'm going to put you in a fucking story, bitch. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
do you come up with that shit, man?